couldn't control you. They saw your gift from the beginning. Don't let them lie about it now. They knew exactly who you were and what you carried. It wasn't that they didn't believe in you, it's that they couldn't own you. And people who can't control your power will always try to discredit it. That's why they called you too intense, too deep, or even crazy. It was never about lack of evidence. Your vision was clear, your presence was undeniable. But since it didn't bend to their rules or fit neatly into their boxes, they tried to tear it down. They couldn't manipulate your purpose, so they tried to minimize it. So they couldn't predict your next move, so they called you unstable. They couldn't take credit for your growth, so they acted like it didn't exist. But deep down they always knew. They saw the light. They just hated the fact that they couldn't dim it or direct it. You weren't waiting for validation. You were building something sacred, something beyond their reach. Now that it's working, now that the doors they said would never open are wide open, they want back in. But the vibe is different. The power dynamic has shifted because the version of you they thought they could control no longer exists. They want access, but now it's on your terms. And that stings their pride. You're no longer asking for support. You're offering opportunity, and they know it. They thought walking away would break you. They thought sidelining you would silence your gift. Instead, it made you more unstoppable. They see it now. They always saw it, but now they can't deny it. And the irony is, the same people who once tried to shrink you are now trying to stand beside you, hoping no one remembers how loud their silence was when you needed them most. But you remember, and so does the universe. Number 9. Some people are switching sides to save face, not to seek truth. Not everyone who comes running toward you has had a change of heart. In fact, most haven't. What's happening is more strategic than spiritual. Some people are switching sides not because they've seen the light, but because their own self-interest is at risk. The ship they were sailing on is sinking, and now they need a new lifeboat. So they're trying to climb onto yours, hoping no one notices they were the ones helping to steer the ship into the storm in the first place. These people didn't suddenly wake up to the truth. They didn't just realize they were wrong about you. What's really happening is that they're trying to salvage their reputation. They see the direction you're heading and they want to be attached to your success. But not because they want to see you win. They want to make sure they don't drown in their own mess. They're cornered. They're afraid. And in their desperation, they'll try to make it look like they've always been on your side. You can't trust every shift in loyalty. Not everyone who praises you now was cheering for you when things were rough. Not everyone who wants to join your circle has good intentions. Some are just trying to rewrite their own story before their past catches up with them. They know that their association with you could give them some much-needed credibility, a way to clean up their image. You've got to stay sharp and watch the motives closely. People are good at disguising self-preservation as growth, but there's a big difference between someone who genuinely wants to change and someone who's only out for damage control. Discernment is everything. The people who were true to you from the start will be the ones still standing when the dust settles. And those jumping ship? They're hoping no one notices. They're just trying to keep their heads above water. Number 10. They thought you were the student, but you were the unrecognized teacher. They thought you were the one who needed guidance, the one who still had a lot to learn. They saw you as the student, the one who was supposed to be molded and shaped by their wisdom. But what they couldn't see, or maybe refused to see, was that you were always the teacher. They were too focused on their own ego to realize that your ideas were already ahead of theirs. Every time they dismissed you, corrected you, or patted you on the head like you were still figuring things out, they were projecting their own insecurity. They couldn't accept that you were already operating on a frequency they couldn't reach. You weren't the one who needed to be taught. You were the one carrying the knowledge they couldn't access. And they couldn't handle that. So they made you feel small. They tried to put you in a box that didn't fit, labeling you inexperienced or unpolished, while secretly resenting the fact that you were seeing things they couldn't. Now, the roles are flipping. The same people who once tried to school you are now quietly repeating your words, passing off your ideas as their own. It's subtle, but you can see it. They're not acknowledging where it came from. They're presenting it like it's a new revelation they've just uncovered. The truth you spoke, the wisdom you carried, is suddenly showing up in their conversations, but this time they've given it a shiny new coat and made it seem like they're the ones who discovered it. But you know, you always knew. You weren't the student. They were. And now that they finally caught up, they're trying to act like they were the ones leading all along, but they can't erase the fact that they dismissed you, laughed at you, and tried to silence you when you were ahead of the curve. The real lesson here is that their envy couldn't stop what was always meant to be. You didn't need their validation to teach your truth. It was always your truth. And now they're parroting it, hoping no one remembers who really had the vision first. Number 11. You weren't ahead of your time. You were on time in a world addicted to delay. You weren't ahead of your time. You were exactly on time in a world addicted to delay. While others were stuck in their own loop of procrastination, hesitation, and excuses, you were moving in divine rhythm, stepping forward with purpose and alignment. They tried to label you as too soon or out of sync because they couldn't keep up with your flow, but you were never out of step. You were simply in tune with a higher frequency, one they didn't understand because they were too busy clinging to cycles of dysfunction. They lived on pause, waiting for a perfect moment that never arrived, trapped in their comfort zones and limiting beliefs. You, however, didn't wait for permission. You didn't wait for the stars to align. You moved forward in the present, trusting that the timing was always right, because it was aligned with something bigger than what they could see. Now they're waking up to the truth. They spent so much time questioning your pace, doubting your direction, and downplaying your evolution that they missed their own chance to grow. They kept delaying their own progress, trying to hold on to outdated systems and patterns that never served them, and in the process they delayed their own evolution. While you were advancing, they were standing still, caught in the inertia of fear and doubt. And now, as they watch your growth unfold, they realize the cost of their resistance. You weren't ahead. You were in the right place at the right time, doing what was meant to be done. It's not that they were wrong. It's that they refused to change, to move, to trust the divine timing of their own journey. They thought they could downplay your path and stay in their comfortable illusion, but the truth is they were the ones who were late to the party, and now they're scrambling to catch up, but it's too late for them to slow your momentum. You've already moved past their delay. Number 12. The enemy they feared was never you. It was the version of themselves that you awakened. The enemy they feared was never you. It was the version of themselves that you unknowingly forced them to confront. You didn't come at them with hatred or bitterness. You didn't attack or undermine them. You just existed as a mirror, reflecting back the potential they had buried deep within. And that mirror, it terrified them. They weren't afraid of your power. They were afraid of the power they saw in themselves, the power they hadn't fully embraced or acknowledged. You were a reminder of what they could be, and that scared them more than anything. You didn't demand anything from them, except for their own growth. But that's exactly what they couldn't handle, because growth requires facing the parts of ourselves we'd rather ignore, our flaws, our insecurities, and our untapped potential. You didn't need to speak a word. Your very presence was a challenge to their comfort zone. And instead of rising to meet the challenge, they tried to break you. They tore at you, tried to discredit you, tried to silence you, because the truth you carried forced them to see the gaps in their own life. It wasn't you they were fighting. It was the version of themselves that they were too scared to face. But now, things are different. As their own journey stagnated, and they realized they couldn't keep pretending, they started seeing the truth. Denying you meant denying their own evolution. The price of rejecting what you represented, growth, authenticity, divine purpose, was a price they weren't willing to pay anymore. They tried to stay on the sidelines, hoping you'd fade, hoping you'd be less of a reminder, but instead they're finally waking up, realizing that they can't ascend unless they align with the truth you carry. So now they want back in. But don't be fooled, this isn't a sudden change of heart. It's the realization that their personal evolution is tied to your presence. They can no longer deny that the only way forward is through you, through what you embody, and through the version of themselves they tried to bury. They are switching sides, not because they've grown spiritually, but because they've realized that you were always the key to their own ascension. Denying you means denying their own future, and now they're scrambling to catch up. Number 13. Your isolation was a divine quarantine to keep your frequency clean. Your isolation wasn't a punishment, it was a divine quarantine, a period of protection to ensure your frequency remained untarnished. While others were caught in the noise, distracted by the chaos of the world, you were being set apart. It wasn't about being left out. It was about being preserved. The very thing that made you different was the thing that kept you separate. People saw your solitude and mistook it for weakness, thinking you were simply on the outside. But the truth is, your isolation was a shield, a divine mechanism to keep your energy and spirit untouched by the corruption and toxicity swirling around you. God had a plan for your purity. You weren't meant to be diluted by the distractions and the fake. While everyone else was out there mixing and mingling in the noise, you were silently being shaped into something that couldn't be infiltrated. You were sealed, protected by a higher power, guarded from the chaos, so that when the time came, you would be able to stand firm while everything false began to fall apart. Now the tides are turning. The things people once clung to, those illusions, those facades are crumbling, and suddenly your purity is the thing that's needed. The very thing they once overlooked or dismissed is now the thing they're drawn to. They see the truth now. While everything else was built on shaky ground, you were the one standing solid, untouched by the filth they allowed to contaminate their lives. They're coming toward you not because you've changed, but because they've realized that what they once exiled holds the only real foundation left. You were never meant to blend in with the crowd. Your separation was preparation. And now that the world is crumbling around them, they're scrambling to align with the one thing that's still standing strong, your frequency. Your isolation was never about rejection. It was about divine preservation. Now, as everything false falls away, people are coming back to the truth they once ignored. They've seen what's real, and it's you. Number 14. You're not rising now. They're just finally waking up to where you've been standing. You're not rising now. They're just finally waking up to where you've been standing all along. You didn't just level up. You were always operating on a higher frequency than they could comprehend. You've been carrying divine elevation from the start, and it's never been about your growth in the way they assumed. You didn't need to climb or evolve to this new height. What you were carrying was always in you, always present, just waiting for the right moment to be recognized. The problem wasn't that you weren't where you're supposed to be, it's that they couldn't see you for who you truly are. They were blinded by their own limitations, distracted by their own noise, and too caught up in their own definitions of success to notice your quiet ascent. Your energy was always at a higher vibration, but they were too focused on the external to recognize the divine power you were already carrying. You weren't just starting to shine now. You've been shining, they just couldn't perceive it. Now the veils are finally dropping. The illusions they held onto are starting to unravel, and they're beginning to see what's been there the whole time. Your path didn't change. Your purpose didn't change. You didn't suddenly become something you weren't before. You're exactly who you've always been. The only difference is that their eyes are starting to open. They're waking up to the truth that you were never behind. You were always ahead in ways they couldn't see, operating on a different wavelength while they were caught in the fog. It's not that you've leveled up. It's that their vision has finally caught up to your reality. Now they're seeing what was always there, and it's forcing them to question everything they thought they knew. But the truth is, you were never in the dark. You were always standing in the light. They just couldn't see it. In the end, what they failed to realize is that the power you've carried was never about loud triumphs or dramatic displays. It was always about quiet, undeniable truth. While they tried to label you, to diminish you, to fit you into their limited boxes, you were always moving according to a divine rhythm that couldn't be swayed by their opinions or their timing. They mistook your stillness for stagnation and your grace for weakness. But what they didn't understand is that you were being prepared for a purpose greater than anything their narrow vision could have ever anticipated. As they scramble to catch up, to make sense of the shift that's happening, they're starting to realize the cost of their resistance, the walls they built, the lies they clung to, the doubts they cast upon you. None of it can withstand the truth of your presence. What they see now isn't your rise. It's their awakening. It's not that you've changed. It's that their eyes are finally seeing what has always been right in front of them. You were never behind. You were always ahead, carrying a wisdom and an energy that couldn't be contained by their limited perspectives. And now that they're starting to recognize it, they can't help but be drawn to the very thing they once rejected. They'll try to come back in, try to align with your energy, but the truth is, you don't need their validation, their approval, or their understanding. You've been walking your path with divine certainty, and the world is finally catching up. As the false crumbles, as the illusions fade, your purity and your vision are what will remain.